Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide Jason. Often we have covered monsters which take human form. Some were once human themselves and fell upon a dark path. Others are creatures of deception. And the one we look at today is both, the Futakuchi-Onna. The Futakuchi-Onna comes from Japanese mythology, and it literally means two-mouthed woman. As with many of their yokai, there are several stories as to her origins, and they each come from different regions and times. In a popular version, a young man lived in a small village. Now, depending on the version, he does change some. In the older version, there was a famine and excessive taxations on crops, and food is in short supply. In the other, while young, he is very frugal and tight with his money. In that village was also a young woman, one he found charming and intelligent, though he was hesitant to add another mouth to feed. When they had eaten together, she had only eaten a tiny portion, and that was enough to convince him to marry her. One day, while he was out cutting wood, she came up behind him to pick up wood from the ground, and as he raised the axe, he accidentally struck the back of her head. This left a small wound which would never heal. Each night, she would only ask for a small amount of food to be delivered to her room, which he obliged. But as time passed, things changed. That wound began to grow. Resentment builds as the small wound forms into a fully functional mouth, complete with lips, teeth, and tongue. It would curse and mutter at the woman and her husband. But she kept it a secret from him. In time, it began to scream and yell, and the woman would suffer. Eventually, the second mouth would learn to control and use her hair like a tentacle to eat. Her hair would reach out and grab pots and steal food from the kitchen. While the woman herself barely ate, the second mouth consumed double. She would hide the mouth behind her hair and in some takes a scarf. Despite how much the second mouth ate, she still remained slender, but their food stores didn't. Now, the ending of this tale goes a few ways. Either the husband finds out, and things end in either one or both of their deaths. Her second mouth wasn't content to die or go without food and ended the husband's life. The other version results in both of them starving. There is one version of the story where the man discovers the second mouth and flees to never be seen again. There is another version of this tale. Here, our monster begins as a mother with two children, one her own and the other a stepchild. Once more, food is scarce, and as you might have guessed, once more we have the evil stepmother, and she plays favorites. She starves her stepchild to be sure that the other has enough to eat. Soon that child dies, but isn't forgotten. The stepchild becomes a malicious spirit which plagues and burrows into the stepmother's or her own child's head and manifests as the second mouth on the back of the head. And then it would devour the food, and allow the stepmother and her own child to starve to death too. This is a monster based on the manifestation of neglect, hatred, malice, and hunger. This monster is the opposite of a glutton and waste. It's a warning against stinginess. Now, this is actually not the only monster which has a mouth on the back of its head, such as the Kishi from African mythology. So, regardless of the version, how would such a monster actually work? What we need is on the surface very simple. We need to duplicate all the mouth and tongue muscles, and attach them to the back of the head. And here's the issue. We're going to do a little test. All you need is your face and a hand. I want you to try putting your hand on your face and pretend to chew. You should be able to feel the muscles. Now try trace them to their origins and insertions, where they begin and where they end. And they actually cover a good chunk of your skull. And if we are going to attach another mouth, we will need to copy all of those. To do so, we will need to thin out the muscles to provide room. And there is another thing that plays a part. This woman was said to only eat a little bit. Most likely, her own jaws are weak and barely able to chew. But we have a couple of other issues. First up, we have the manipulation of the hair. Hair does actually have small muscles called the erecta pili, which only raise and lower them, not move or bend them. So, all we need to do is move this muscle from outside the hair to inside the hair. and then we can make it work, similar to how an elephant's trunk or tongue functions. And that brings me back to the mouth a bit. It was said to swallow and talk. Now, that means it will need a whole esophagus and trachea. And you were probably thinking that it could share the woman's. And it could, except for the problem of it speaking while she wasn't. If they share a trachea, air would escape from her mouth as well. Though, without the proper mouth and tongue positions, it would just sound like a wheezing noise. Unless they were separate, that is. And this can be important. Remember, it was said that the woman was in pain from the second mouth. And this is a two-part answer. The first is the additional head muscles would be pulling on her skull. Most likely, she is dealing with a constant migraine from the head. And there is a second one. And that would be the crowded throat with the extra trachea. It shouldn't limit how much air comes into her lungs, and could actually improve it a bit. But if it's crowded, it will feel like she has a swollen throat. The hair muscles would constantly be pulling on the scalp. Throw in something speaking from the back of your head, yeah, I'd get a headache too. Now, it didn't just say random things, it was intelligent. Mostly saying thoughts and feelings that the woman held but didn't share. And this brings up an interesting idea, that it is tied to her brain. And this makes a lot of sense due to the limited space available in the skull. Potentially, the second mouth was part of a conjoined twin, which barely developed. And this brings up an interesting twist, that the second mouth was not a separate entity or mind, but was in fact the woman herself saying those things, and just hiding behind the second mouth. A manifestation of her subconscious. Overall, this isn't that complicated for biology, but has more complications on what it really is. So, how can we battle such a monster? Well, this thing is a human woman. So right away, we are looking at something with similar strength to yourself. But there's a bit more. She was said to have a petite build, so maybe even less strength. Now, we know she was able to reach the kitchen from her bedroom using her long hair. So at least a few feet, and perhaps it can stretch. This means you are dealing with a whip-like attack, which might focus on grappling. So you need to keep it from binding you. In concept, this is like fighting an octopus, which can maneuver on land. The worst thing it can do is wrap around your throat. But if it wraps around your arm, could you break it? I mean, as far as we know, this is literally just human hair. And that breaks from brushing it, right? Well, maybe. Well, maybe if you get it into nice thick braids it won't break. And that is assuming that you don't just pull it from the scalp, which again is doable. And that is all before we get to cutting the hair, which people do for a living. It doesn't take super scissors to cut it. Nope, just regular scissors. Wow, that's another thing I never thought I would put on my usable weapons list. And once you get past the hair, this is a woman. And I'm not sure if the woman will be fighting with or against the second mouth. If she doesn't want it, you will likely be having a thrashing and panicking woman, which could make things more difficult. But that might be worse than having one working with it. She could pick up a weapon and take a swing, but the hair could also pick up a knife or a frying pan. Armor would be useful if it does grab something, though distance is going to be better. A bow and arrow is going to be perfect. Honestly, as a physical brawl, it won't do much. Magic is useful, but I'm not sure about sleep spells, since it does feed at night. But fire spells will be a great option to burn away the hair, or a spell that makes hair fall out. A bald foe is going to be easier here. After that, ice magic will be good for binding and stopping it from attacking. Oh, and also chewing gum. That could be a fun option. And if we are dealing with a wicked spirit possessing the woman, then an exorcism might work and end the fight right away. This won't be that tough of a foe. It's not that strong, and aside from some binding abilities, it doesn't have anything to make it difficult. And once you get rid of the hair, it's basically harmless. Yeah, I'm only giving the Futakuchi-Onna a 3 attempt for difficulty. It's not much tougher than a human. So, what do you gain from beating this foe? Well, not much. You get some hair. Sure, it can be used to make rope and some fabric, but that's about it. Okay, you might also have a woman who is thankful. So that's nice. And you might make sure that there is more food available, but that might not be much. So, not much to gain from this victory, except one less monster. But could you work with one? Maybe? It depends on how well the woman is. If she is working with a second mouth, it would be possible. Now you would get an ally with extendable hair to grapple your foes. But there is a high chance that she'll try and steal all your food. So that's an extra expense. But you can make it work. But what to do if the woman is left with a second mouth? Well, she would need to keep her head shaved, else the second mouth will start eating. And I would probably recommend keeping something shoved in the second mouth to keep it from talking and eating everything. Hopefully the woman can learn to live with it. Else it will end up being difficult. Yet it might fade after some time when we address the conditions which caused it to appear in the first place. Overall, this isn't that impressive of a monster. It's more of a stealth foe than a combatant. If you meet a Futakuchi-Onna, you shouldn't have much trouble with it. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.